Hello, everyone. How are we doing? We'll give it a minute, let everyone get on. All that good stuff. All right. Let's see. Hello, hello. I'm just honestly so glad it works. I'm not gonna lie. Yay, it works. Yesterday was like so stressful. Happy Tuesday. It's like the minute I went on to do my live and it was just like nothing was going on. So yeah, so we actually did this whole thing over on Twitter, Amber and I. And I posted an oracle card. I posted a tarot card. She posted an oracle card, and we just kind of did it. Like, it was fun. So if you don't follow us over on Twitter, I definitely recommend hopping over there. Hello. Oh, I see my sister. All right, so let's get Gabe on here. See. Yeah, I just blew it all out. Yeah, it's totally me. I'll take the blame, you know. Yeah, it was different. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I was just saying I was so happy everything was working.
That's right. Yeah.
They let us have the internet today, so we're going to take advantage. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but today it's here.
That's good.
Yes. All right. So let me just introduce you real quick, and then we will get going. Everyone, welcome. Today we have Gabriel Marihugh. He's the creator of the Wild Harmonic Oracle deck, and it is coming out very soon. Now, Gabe, are you having trouble with the shipping and all that? Because I know there's everybody seems to be having lots of shipping issues.
Yeah, I'm told there are issues around the publisher just getting it in stock.
Yeah. Everybody's like, oh, all our decks are sitting on a ship somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which, it'll get here eventually. And I think with all the stuff we've been through, like, what's another couple weeks? It's fine.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to start at the beginning with you. I'd really love to know, like, how did you start with Oracle? And you read tarot as well?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. So how did that start? Where did you pick all that up?
Well, it all started with the runes. I think I was about 12 or 13, and I just saw it in a rune book, and it came with a set of runes, and I was like, I have to have that. Just really, something in it made sense, even though I had no idea what it was.
Right.
And I'd played lots of. I was really into all kinds of different esoteric ideas because I'd played lots of Dungeons and Dragons or whatever, but I hadn't ever tried to do something like that.
Right.
So yeah, the runes really started me off on I guess what you could call is like the divination path. I know people like to use the word oracle and divination and all these things in very persnickety ways, but I kind of think of it in a lot of ways as really all the same, even though there's different sort of head spaces I might go into for different systems. Right.
That's just kind of like the umbrella term. I like using that too, because it is. You start trying to explain it and you're like, well, oracle, and it's like, it's all divination. It's all divining something. So no matter what it is.
Yeah.
So, as you went on, and now is runes kind of your first love? Like, do you still really go for that, or you just kind of use whatever you feel like?
Well, the runes really were, they really transformed me, is the only way to put it. Like, I was using them, and I'd use them in a sort of like, I have problems, what can I do about that kind of self-reflective process.
Right.
That I don't know, where I got that. I just started doing it that way. And then that led to like some pretty radical, I almost want to say like states of consciousness years and years and years later, that I could look back and see how reflecting on the runes like kind of set me up for that kind of transformation.
Right.
And that just made me super curious and interested in pretty much everything.
Right.
right? I
Yeah.
was like, what was that? You know, like that
I
can happen,
understand this.
right? Like that's a thing that happens, and if it does happen, does it happen to others? And why isn't anyone talking about that? But you can find all of that in the, you know, in the occult lore and the spiritual lore and the mystic lore, and you know, from around the world, you find all of these, you know, like
Right.
Castaneda calls them tales of power. You know, it's all hearsay when someone talks about mystical states or whatever.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but
Now,
that, yeah.
yeah, where did you find like your information? Because I know when I started doing tarot and all that, you know, we couldn't hop on the internet at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
So where was like your best source of finding all the info?
I worked in a spiritual bookshop for 9 years.
Oh,
Yeah.
that works.
And it, yeah, it gave me access to book lists and things, anything I wanted to order, you know, as friends with the owner, so I could just say, this looks interesting, and we'd get it in, and I didn't have to buy it. I could just read it while I was working, and you know.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so
Yeah.
jealous.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a good, you know, it was a sort of college in a way.
Yeah, yeah, for real. And then it's like, then you can just, it's like a kind of like a library, but you get to choose the books that you get, not just
Yeah.
what they have.
Yeah.
You know, now do you do readings for people? Do you have clients and stuff, or is it more just a personal practice for you?
Lately, it's been just a personal practice. I've come and gone from like the professional reading world a dozen times, you know,
Yeah.
since I, you know, started doing this, and I've explored so many different modalities. Like I'm a like a trained clairvoyant, so I've done like, let me sit in a chair in front of you and tell you what I see kind of
Right,
readings.
right.
And then I've been like, no, let's put a buffer of cards between us, because you know, I don't really
Yeah.
feel like working that hard. And you know, and you know, runes and pendulums, and you know, just reading omens in life and so forth. So yeah, it's,
Yeah.
you know, I was recently talking to my clairvoyant teacher from years and years ago. We're still in touch, and I studied with him for like 15 years, and like
Wow.
learned all these different approaches. And
Mhm.
he's a multi PhD psychologist, so he brings all of this sort of like self growth kind of perspective to the whole
Yeah. Oh,
process,
I
right?
love that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I love it too. And you know, he was talking. We were talking about something, and I said, you know, he was saying like, well, have you been out there doing readings and healings or whatever, you know, because those are sort of the two modalities that we got into.
Mhm.
Um, and I was like, no, I actually took you seriously with all the stuff that you taught. And so when you follow that course of the actual information that's coming through, it just becomes like a way of life. It's
Right.
less about um, the identity of being a reader or a healer and trying to establish that in a culture that rejects it. Like, I find all of that interesting, and I think
Hmm.
it's a worthy undertaking, but it's not necessarily like required in order to understand what tarot is or what psychic energies are, or anything like that. So my personal movement has always been like, how can the farmer apply this? How can the banker apply this? How can the, right, like if I'm not going to like set up shop in the back of some, you know, cool little bookshop and try to make a living that way. Which, don't get me
Hmm.
wrong, I know tons of people who do that, and
Oh, yeah.
that's its own, and I've done it a number of times, and it's its
Yep.
own realm.
It is.
Um,
So it really is.
it's the trenches, you know, like
Yes.
you really learn trial by fire doing that kind of stuff.
Right.
Um, but I'm interested in it not so much as like an anachronism of like, oh, I'm a fortune teller and I'm living that lifestyle. As cool as that is, don't get me wrong, nothing
Yeah.
against it.
No.
I love it.
Absolutely.
But I'm interested in it as like, well, how do I shape my life with these understandings? Like, how do I,
Right.
you know, how do I shape my life? And for me, shaping my life involves this understanding of like, how do I shape my family's life? How do I shape my community's life? How can I help from one perspective steer the world in a better direction? And I think a major missing piece is this sort of divination realm, this psychic realm, divination realm, soul work realm, you know, all of that stuff to me is just, it's all the same stuff. Like
Right.
divination is just one inroad into soul work, and so on.
Yeah.
As practical as it can be. Like, don't get me wrong, I have some, like, I use a dice system when I'm like, should I make this investment? And I just roll the
Right.
dice, and it's just like super clear, like, you know,
Yeah. Like that's it. Done.
right, it's done. And you could say, well, there was no like introspection or whatever, but I think just that process of of engaging the divination and using an object and putting a level of like trust and so forth into objects and what random generators might reveal to us. I think all of that is like weirdly self-reflective and part of, you know, I would call it healing, but I use that term very broadly. Like
Right.
I consider pretty much anything that brings us more into alignment with the life we want was healing, whether
True.
that's a magic spell or whatever, you know.
Right. Like however you want to use it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm definitely read like that as well, like trying to use it to like help that person and like try to like, all right, well, and I always joke, I'm like, I always give homework
Nice. Yeah. Yeah.
after a reading, like everyone gets homework, but but it is very different from like what I used to do expos. And like you said, the
Yeah.
trenches,
Oh,
that's the trenches.
yeah. I mean, it's super fun too, right? Because it's like it's a moment of culture that we can pretend we belong to that doesn't always exist, right? It's like pop-up culture. It's like Burning Man, you know, it's like this moment where we're like, oh, I'm accepted here, and everyone that comes here is like expecting me to be this way, rather than me having to explain, here's what I'm doing and why I exist and why I believe these things and all that stuff, right?
It is like
Yeah.
why I exist, and it is,
Yeah.
and it's like the question of like, well, what do you do? And I actually yesterday I was somewhere and they're like, oh, well, what do you do? And and I always just pause because I'm like, I don't know what the hell to say to you because you're not going to understand any of it.
Right,
or you're
right.
going to have all these like preconceived notions, and then it's like, okay, well, so you kind of get into it, but and it is interesting because some sort of the occult has been around forever, but yet.
Right.
It's still so like now I think it's definitely with the internet and everything gotten a little bit more out there, but for a long time I would say I read tarot and then people are like, oh my god,
Right, right.
it is it's just a crazy it's a crazy thing, like if you really start to think about it. And now it's like everybody's doing it, and then and of course that has its pluses and minuses as well. So even coming up to that, what advice would you have for someone who is looking to get some sort of spiritual work or help or reading? Like, what advice do you have for them if they're searching for someone?
If they're searching for like a practitioner to
do. If they're looking to have some sort of energy work or even a reading done, like what
and they don't know anything about any of it.
Yeah, they're just like coming to go, they saw a video on TikTok. They're like, hey, Gabe, I want to get this stuff done. What do I look for?
Yeah, what do I look for? Yeah, well, that's the whole process, is asking that question. And so so the first thing to look at is that you're just asking that question, and that you probably will always ask that question from then on forever. Right? Like as we move and we decide to study with someone, or we decide to get a reading or try a healing practice or whatever we're doing, it's always that question, is this right for me? And so really, no matter what the objective is like, because I need a reading because I need to change my career, or I'm trying to fix, my broken knee, or whatever the objective may be. The sort of occult, right, the hidden aspect of it is that we're refining our sense of how to move through life, right? We're refining our intuition, and that's always, as far as I can tell, that's always a process of trial and error, and it's always upgrading. It's not like, now I know my intuition and I will always follow it. Like it's this gooey, the whole Alan Watts thing, prickles and goo, the two sides of reality, right? There's I like to say spirit and soul, right? You have the sort of sacred geometry spirit side of things, and you have the gooey soul work stuff that doesn't play by any rules. Like it literally, it's just constantly shape shifting. And the intuition is sort of that space between the two. And so that's what I would always encourage someone towards, like when they start to be like, oh, I want to work with this practitioner, I'm not sure why. Do it, find out, right? Like, like there's no really getting it right. There's moments where we strike gold, and then there's moments where we have like these terrible disasters of encounters, right? Both as practitioners or as clients, and we just have to sort of season ourselves to that process, because no matter what happens, it has tempered us to understand like, well, what was drawing me towards them, and why did that go wrong?
Right,
Right.
right.
Like
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend who's a practitioner that he's a, you know, like straight up like healer, like you sit down and he does healing work on you kind of thing. And
Uh-huh.
he always, I forget what he has, like 4 questions he asks every person when they first show up for a session. And one of them was like, how was the drive over? Because that can indicate how aligned with getting the healing work they're actually going to be in
Right,
that moment.
right,
Like, are there these sort of like, you know, you might call them karmas or whatever,
right.
adverse forces, you know, trying to manifest to keep the pattern that's current in place, right?
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
boy, what a terrible answer to your question. It's so complex. You know what I mean? Like,
It
it's really
is, yeah.
complex. Like,
No, I
I would
think that was
say,
good.
yeah, I would say if
Yeah.
someone wants to ask that question of me, they should probably get a reading because I
Yeah,
obviously have
right.
too much to
Just
say about it.
well, and no, I think you raise a good point though too. Is like, instead of just keep questioning it and asking all the people, just do it and see what happens.
Yeah, you
You
have to,
know?
the game of intuition is you I don't want to say you have to risk your life, because
Right.
please don't just go start risking your life to see if you can
Yeah.
fly or whatever. But it is like your lifestyle, your life path is what's on the
Mhm.
line. And that's the only way we really find out, like the whether we call it a gut feeling or you know,
Mhm.
if some people have a somatic sense, some people are much more like just a direct knowing, you know, turn left, and
Right.
they don't know why or whatever. And
Yeah, yeah.
other people get downloads from like guides. They're like, you need to turn left because that is going to lead you
Yeah,
this, you
right,
know, and all
right.
that.
Yes.
And so it's like we have to learn those layers of ourself and like the different kinds and styles of intuition that you know, that we're akin to, and I'm a fan of developing the ones that we're not. Like I you know,
Yeah.
weigh in heavily on the ones that work for you to get somewhere, and then
Hmm.
explore the ones that don't make any sense to you, just to
Right.
kind of, you know, just to learn, to grow. Yeah.
Right, right. And I think too, like you said, it's all just about keeping it simple too, and not, just like your friend asking that question, how's the ride over? Like nobody would think that means anything, but like you said, if you're really being mindful and paying attention to the answer, you could get a lot from that.
Right. Yeah.
And I think just even as somebody who does readings or healing, you tend to do that. You kind of you look at it, and I always say that there's no black and white, there's just gray. Like
Yeah.
I live in the gray. I always say
Right.
that, because there are, just different things. If that person comes in and it's just like, oh my god, there's so much traffic, everybody's, ridiculous and whatever, then like, okay, I see where this person's at,
Yeah.
But if they come in and they're like, oh no, it was all right, little traffic, no big deal, that's like two totally different readings,
Totally.
right there.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
For
Exactly.
sure, for sure. It is, and it is crazy. And like you said, intuition is just so important. A lot of us don't, a lot of people just don't pay attention to it,
Hmm.
or they're afraid to pay attention to it. And for again, I'm going to ask for more advice. For someone who doesn't know how to develop their intuition, what are some of your favorite ways? What has worked for you? I know what worked for
Yeah.
everyone, but what has really worked for you?
Well, you know, working with cards can be really fun, or some even runes or whatever. You know, obviously runes kind of require a book,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, until you get really into it and, you know, have all these references internally for them. But you know, a card is an image, right? Like a dream. It's like this. It's this moment that you can just sit with and be with, and so just that act of sitting with the card art and letting it play in your mind is a development of intuition.
Mm-hmm.
um yeah, there's so many ways of developing intuition, and of
Right.
course playing with cards where you're like, what is this week going to be like, and you draw your
Mm-hmm.
3 cards and write down what you get from those cards, and then come back to that a week from
Yep.
then, right? And that kind of process can be really good, or you know, daily or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
um but intuition really comes through uh, that kind of giving it a go. You know, I think you hit on something so vital
Yeah.
too with the gray, right? The gray space, because
Mm-hmm.
is, you know, to get
Yeah.
a good reading, to enter into a good space and have a great reading, it's actually a collaborative space, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Like some people show
Right.
up for a reading and they're like, tell me
Yes.
what's going, you know, and it's like, well, there's
Right
literally
now.
I can't even read you, right? Like you're just
Right.
blocking everything.
Yeah.
And that you can also, that can go too far and be like, well, you're not cooperating, so I can't heal you, or you're not cooperating, so I can't right? And it goes into like
Yeah,
bypass and
absolutely.
so forth. And so there's this gray area, and what I like to call it is this space of entertaining the idea.
Hmm.
And it's a lost art. People don't know how to entertain the idea anymore. This
Right.
world this world is like toxic with this modern version of skepticism that
Right.
is not reflective of early skepticism. Like early skepticism was more entertaining the idea. You could actually
Yeah. Yeah.
take on ideas not knowing. I'm skeptical. I don't know, I'm
Right.
skeptical that this is true, but I will give it a go. And
Exactly. Right.
right.
And we're not
And
as impatient. It's the impatience too. Everybody's so impatient.
yeah, that's true. Huh. Yeah.
It's like right
Yeah.
now. I want it right now. I want to be a reader right now. And it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, way back when they just kind of did it and they just incorporated it into their lives. And then that's it. They knew they knew how to work it and their intuition was building. But now, it is. Everybody's like, oh, well, I got these cards and I want to know how to read them right now. And that's like one of the things I'm always telling people when I'm teaching, like, there's no rush. There's no alarm clock. There's no finish
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
You're never going to stop learning. I've been doing it for like 30 years and I'm still learning. And
Right.
that's like one of the best parts of it is that learning,
Yeah.
But, so what was the inspiration for your deck?
Oh, so many different things came together for this deck. So at the time I was at the very beginnings of the deck. I mean, of course, I like the whole journey. I've been like, I want to create cards. It's so cool. Like I'm a visual artist. I'm a conceptual artist. So like
Oh, okay.
the idea of making a deck just was like, everyone was always like, you should make a deck. I was just that guy.
Right.
So I was always pondering what that could be. At the time that this first came together, I was doing a lot of like, like Golden Dawn and Crowley and Kabbalah and numerology, gematria, and like that whole kind of thing. So I was really looking at systems and how they interlock and
Yeah.
pieces from all over fit together and all that. And I came up with this basic, I didn't come up with it. It's been mentioned other places, but I noticed that it wasn't much used, and it's just this relationship between elements. So you have like fire of earth and earth of fire, right? So if you have your
Yeah.
core elements, you then have 16 relationships. And I became fascinated with that as a structure for a magical language. Because if you add in 5 elements, then you have 25 relationships, and that's 25 letters is a lot of letters to work with. Kind of perfect
Yeah.
for our, for a roughly correlated to English kind of alphabet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it began as that, and it started as that sort of like magical language and these energies of the elements and how they relate to each other. And as I used that language in like ceremony and various weird ways that we all do with weird stuff like that,
Oh, yes.
it struck me one day. I was like, oh, each of these could be like a card, and then I could draw those cards and have this cool experience for myself. And so I started to develop them that way, and that was the beginning of it. It took like, I think, it was over 10 years before I had an actual copy of the deck in hand from that point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was a long process. The art
Yeah.
was the longest process. Not so much that it took that long to do the art, but it took that long to try different styles of art until I found what, like, the cards were like, yes, this worked.
Yeah,
There was like this whole animistic experience of the cards where they were telling me what to do a lot,
Right.
Yeah.
No,
And so
you definitely do that.
it has that, in its basic underpinnings, it has this magical language structure. And then because of the whole clairvoyant, practices and so forth, I brought in the energy centers, which
Okay.
I've moved away from calling them chakras just because that implies a whole cultural context that I have very little to do with anymore.
Right.
As much as it borrows so many of its original ideas from that, this Western energy center thing. But it's it's that was such a strong element in my life. It was what I taught a lot and so forth. And then all of a sudden one day the cards were like, look, those fit right there. And so it just became this like sort of like gathering for all these different places that I had explored that were kind of their own realms. Like, like occultists don't really get into new age energy work, and new age energy workers are usually like, the occultists are the problem. And, And I was just this
It's
sort of
true.
being that's like, it's all good. Like I'm into,
Yeah. We're
how
all
can
gonna
you,
play together. It's
how
fine.
can you not see this as the same inquiry? You know, like it's
Right.
all about shaping reality. That's
No,
it.
it
That's
is.
like,
It's
that's
so
what comes,
true.
yeah.
Yeah, and you know, people just they like to put things in boxes, and I think just anything aesthetic in general cannot be put in a box. So already, like that's the problem. Like when everyone's trying to like this
Yeah.
is this is that, you know.
Yeah.
So how you know, how do you use the cards? Like what's a great way to even get to know the cards when you first get your deck?
Well, you know, how I use the cards is going to be different than anyone else because when I draw a
Mm-hmm.
card, it's like instant. I'm like, oh yeah, hi, you know, oh
Right,
yeah,
right,
oh
right.
you, yeah, thanks, I
Yeah,
knew that,
this is what we're
you
doing
know,
today. Okay.
yeah, and it's like I always knew it too. Like I draw the card and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, fine, I hear you, I knew that, you know.
Right.
So I have this far more like family member kind of relationship with the cards, right? I'm like, leave me alone. Stop telling me.
Right.
I already know that. But yeah, so there's like lots of layers that you can play with these cards, right? It's not just like an Oracle deck where I took a bunch of concepts and put one on each of a card. So each of the cards, the imagery and the concept for each card is derived from my like reflection and meditation on the elemental relationship that's at the top of the card. Now, those elemental relationships then also relate to a particular way of understanding the energy centers and elemental
Mhm.
attributions for them. Not the only
Right.
way, but the way I use primarily and is
Yeah.
woven into this deck. And so a really fun way to play with the cards would be with two cards. So right, because then the whole deck is about relationships, right? The whole
Yeah.
deck is
No,
about
that
like
definitely makes sense.
subtle energy relationships, right?
Hmm.
And so draw two, right? And see the
Yeah.
relationship. And you can so like when you draw two cards, you'll have possibly four different elements. But you might have some elements in common between the cards, and you can start to see how those cards are relating through a particular energy center as a reflection for what they're telling you. And then you can
Right.
also look at, you know, like, you know, you could draw original wakefulness and dreaming layers, let's say, two of
Hmm.
the more cosmic-y kind of cards in the deck. And you can play with that. Original wakefulness, dreaming layers. You can change it to dreaming wakefulness, original layers. You know, you can
Yeah.
mix and match with the energies of the cards to see how they're relating. And then, of course, there's the art, which don't get me wrong, I'm not like a proud artist, but I did really try hard. You know, I'm not like, the art
Yeah.
is amazing. You'll get tons out of it.
Right. Right.
Um,
Right.
I'm actually, you know, I do love the art, but it doesn't feel like it was like a lot of my decision making that went into the art because I tried to keep boiling it down to simpler and simpler ideas because something that happens for me in reading cards of all kinds, tarot or otherwise, is that suddenly a shape will jump out. You know, it might be, you
Yes.
know, it might be the whatever, the Seven of Swords or whatever, but the shape of the shirt looks like a fish suddenly, right? And
Right.
it
Yes.
isn't that I'm gonna say like, oh, well, this means you're gonna travel at sea, but it creates a process in my own consciousness that relates me to, oh, there's Piscean energies in this moment
Yes.
while
Hmm.
I'm reading it. And so I tried to make the cards know, I tried to make the art know that it was there for that. Like I
Right.
want people to have sort of non-ordinary perspectives of the art. And some of them are so kind of weird that a lot of people don't even know what the picture is of too, because of that. Even then I pointed out and they're like, oh, I see that, you know? So
Yeah.
I feel
Right.
like
Right.
that's a
Right.
success in a way. As
Yeah.
much as
No,
I know
definitely.
everyone wants answers right now and just tell me, draw my card and move on. I'm like, that's not this deck. Like, if you want that,
That's not
roll the,
happening
yeah,
here.
flip a coin or roll dice. Yeah, like, if you
Right.
want direct answers.
Exactly, exactly. Do the click
Yeah,
thing. Yeah, the colors are beautiful. I mean, I obviously don't have it yet, but the just seeing online and if you go onto Gabe's website too, he has a little video on there and he has some pictures of it. And so how did you decide to make the cards round instead of just the traditional square-ish, I guess like rectangle-ish oracle card?
rectangles. Yeah. Well, they were, you know, originally they were squares.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first versions I made of them. And I just wanted them in a way to be something a little different,
Yeah.
you know, in that way. So
And
I played with
I
that for a
love
while.
circle decks too. I love them. So I saw that. I was like, ooh.
That just happened one day. Like I was like, it hadn't occurred. It wasn't on my mind for years. And I finally started getting, like, I found the artistic direction that was working. And
Right.
I think I made like 4 or 5 cards at the beginning of the sequence of the cards and got to like the fifth card and was like, this is happening. Like
Yeah.
I can see the whole deck this way now.
Here we go. Yeah.
And then it was like the next day, something in me, you know, I think of it as the cards, you know, they were like, put us in a round thing. I was like, oh, okay. Isn't that like, that's the Mother Pieces thing, right? Isn't it kind of
Right,
cool
right.
that that's the only one? I mean, it turns out there's quite a few others that I didn't know about, but like that
Yeah,
was,
there's a few,
I
but
wasn't
yeah,
trying to
no,
like
it's
rip off.
fun.
Yeah, I didn't want to rip anyone off, but I put it into the circle and I was like, yeah, like
Right.
circles. I'm tired of squares. I want to live in a dome and
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
spin around like a Sufi. And you know, it's all about spirals and circles and all that.
No,
So
and it does. It like works beautifully. It just like you said, it just like this is how it's supposed to be, like just like
right,
that. So
yeah.
that's
Thank
pretty
you.
awesome. So how, when you finally got the deck in your hands, like were you like, holy shit, this actually happened? Or like what were your
I,
like first thoughts when
I
you
was
finally
freaked
got it in
out.
your hands?
Yeah, I was freaked out because
I bet, yeah.
the creation of the deck was such a personal process of
Mhm.
attempting to take very personal experiences and universalize them, put them into
Right.
terms that weren't like about me per se,
Hmm.
right? I mean, of course, it has my
Yeah.
character in there, like I chose the words and the art
Right.
and all that, but really not trying to be like you need to follow Gabe's path, but try to universalize it as much as possible. Which is
Hmm.
something I'm always trying to do with whatever I teach, right? I'm always trying to
Right.
like
Right.
put it in general terms so that we can actually communicate. But
Yeah.
it freaked me out because it was such a personal experience. I was like, if I let anyone else hold this deck, like they're going to be in touch with like my soul. I was like having all these like weird,
Right.
you know, like
Yeah.
esoteric paranoia thoughts. And yeah, I just sat with it for a couple of days and I was like, well, I'm not the first person to do this. So I might as
Exactly.
well, like going back to intuition and putting your life path on the line to see what happens. I just finally decided, let's see what happens,
Right.
right? The
Right.
worst case scenario is I change my name and I move into a cave somewhere and I never, you know, no one ever hears from me again or something, right? Like
That
worst
is
case.
it.
Yeah, like I could just go, that was a terrible mistake. Now people know
Right.
something about me that I didn't mean to tell them or, you know, whatever.
They
Um,
have, they have seen my essence. It's too
yeah.
much.
Yeah, exactly. But
Right.
I love esoteric conversation. It's so close to my heart. In fact, I host before quarantine, I was hosting weekly tea ceremonies where we just you
Oh,
know sit around
cool.
and have tea and you know chat about whatever. But a lot of
Yeah.
times it would
Yeah.
go to the esoteric. So I absolutely love it, and I feel like part of like my life is bringing more of that into the world. And I felt like this
Right.
deck. I used to joke, if you have this deck, you can have a conversation with me without me being there. Which is kind of weird and
Right.
narcissistic in a way too, but you know, like it, that was like, that's the only words I can find for like how it felt
Yeah.
when I first had it. I was like, oh, this is kind
No,
of creepy to
definitely.
me. Yeah.
But it makes sense though. It does make sense. And I think that any of us that are in this realm, we get that,
Right.
and we're
Yeah. Yeah.
like, we're just like, right, yeah, okay. It's
Yeah.
usually, the kind of the creepier you are with it, we're all just like, oh wait, what are you talking about? Like we want to know more about it. So
I
I
love
think
it.
that's awesome. And, just from what I've seen, I do feel that there are so many ways to work with these cards. And like you even said, like the energy centers, like even to ask the cards, like what energy centers do I need to focus on today or this week or whatever. So, that can even, roll right into journal prompts and like just if
For
you are
sure.
a journaler and just rolling right into that and really diving into it. I love that it does have so many different aspects that you can work with it and, learn. And then you could do that for others as well, because, when it comes down to it, everything we do is to help, is to help others and kind of teach them and show them and, show them that this isn't all scary and weird, maybe a little bit, but that's okay. Just enough
Yeah.
to be fun, that's it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, and I'm really excited for it to come out and really start working with it as well.
Thank you. Yeah.
So why don't you tell everyone where they can pre-order it, where they can find it, and where they can find you?
Great. Well, the easiest place is wildharmonic.com. That's the deck and also my main website where I do all this nonsense through. You know,
Yes.
it's not oriented towards the senses. It's nonsense.
Exactly.
In a sort of Alice in Wonderland kind of way.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that too.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that's very Alice in Wonderland, and I'm here for it.
Right. Yeah, I'm a fan. And so you can find pre-order links. It's I prefer if you pre-order on Amazon. That is like where the publisher has said they do the most tracking and so forth. And pre-orders, of course, help the longevity of the project. Like how much gets pre-ordered is some sort of analytic they use. I'm a web developer, so I'm heavy into all this stuff, but it's totally out of my hands too. So I'm trying not to think too much about it, right? Like,
yeah, right.
I'd be looking at the data every day if it were up to me.
Yes. So it's good that that's not a thing for you.
Yeah.
Right?
And on the site, there is a little video you mentioned, which is just sort of a artsy craftsy sort of video intro to the deck. You can see most of the cards in it, and then there's so the set, I don't know if if people can see it or whatever, but the set, it's very cool. It's a circle deck, but they made it a hexagon box. And so the book is actually a hexagon too. It's really, I love the book.
Awesome.
It's really cool.
That's fun.
Like I felt like so honored. I was like, wow, they like me. But so it comes with a book, and it's very Oracle driven book, right? Like some people are like, can't you just say it straightforward that this is, a tall dark stranger in November or whatever kind of, thing. And I feel like language is part of our problem and part of our solution. So I'm the language I use in it is about constructing realities, right? So like learning to understand a perspective of a card. So that's this book. I am also on the website writing up additional information for every card, and you can see there's about 15 of them are done right now, and that'll just be ongoing. I was hoping to have that done by the time the deck came out, but I have a 14-month-old son, so lots of things haven't been getting done.
Yes, no, I understand. I have 4 boys. I do understand.
Yeah, you more than get it then. Yeah, there's a lot that doesn't get done. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's amazing. No, yeah, that's definitely super cool, and I love that. So and I did notice too, you do have an email list too, so that's probably something to hop on to kind of keep up to date on all these things and the cards and everything. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your mind with us, and I look forward to the cards, and once I get them, I'll probably do a walkthrough on here too as well. So
awesome. Yeah.
Take a peek at it. So yeah. But thank you so much, and everybody, thanks for coming and hanging out with us. Be sure to go check out everything on Gabe's website, sign up for the things, pre-order his deck, and if you do get it, make sure to post it as well. Creators, it helps creators, when you tag him and you post it on all the things, it really does help, and it is very much appreciated when we do that. So definitely do that.
Yeah, it's huge. It's really huge.
Absolutely. So that's very important for us. But all right. Thank you so much, Gabe. You have a awesome
thank you
day.
So much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, and I'm really looking forward to it. All right. Have a great day.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.